So, our hope is to redeem, and, in 8 years it's only happened a very small number of times that we've actually had to go all the way through the 1 Corinthians 5 or Matthew 18 thing. And
but you might want to mention that the first step in Matthew 18 happens daily. I mean,
to go to Him and Him alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Touching people's lives is just a foundational, cornerstone.
Right. Be called alongside, admonish, warn, encourage one another daily, so that none are hardened and deceived by sin. Yeah, that's a daily process of the Word of God, which is useful for all of these things. I mean, that's what it's for, is to help each other grow.
And if that foundation isn't laid, which it isn't in most expressions around the United States, then I don't see how you can function. If that understanding that my life's an open book and you're allowed to touch it doesn't exist, then you might want to elaborate on that.
Well,
if that's not true, then I don't see how you're going to go forward, at least in this area.
Was it Archimedes that invented the lever, or discovered the lever? Was that him? I don't know. I think it was. The guy who discovered the power of the lever made this statement. He said, if you give me a long enough lever and a place to stand, I can move the world. His point was that even planet Earth was not too large for even him with his weak, frail muscle system. He could move even planet Earth if the lever was long enough and he had some place to stand. He could move the world. And that is a spiritual principle. God invented it in the seen world, but it's also true in the unseen world. And that is the rock, the foundation of the whole church being built on putting into practice His Word, rather than I like this style of worship, I believe this way, my parents were this way, I like the teaching or the sermons, the building's nice and air conditioned. If it's anything other than putting into practice the Word of God, then what will happen is I'll try to do something that Jesus commanded me to do, and I won't be able to do it. My gift will be dormant, because if I try to exercise it, that's intimidating to somebody and they squish me. That happens all over the world every day. The gifts are squished by men with ambition that want to control other people's gifts. But in addition to that, if I just want to do a simple command, like go to Him and Him alone, Jesus said if there's sin there, Jesus said this, if there's sin there, go to Him and Him alone, and if He hears you, you've won your brother. If He won't hear you, then bring 2 or 3 others. There are very few places in the world that could actually do that and then ultimately go to the church, because the whole system is so unbiblical and so unfounded, so built on sand, that there's no place to stand. You can't move anything, because all you can do is throw out your opinion. If they happen to respond to it, great. If they don't care, then they can blow you off, and that's the end of it, and there's nothing else you can do about it. You can't find 2 or 3 witnesses that are willing to get involved, and if you could, you'd be viewed as a little heretical group, that probably the whole group would be called on the carpet, and you're sure not going to be able to go in front of the whole church next in most environments. I mean, it just isn't that way in most situations. That's a real clear indication that it's not built on Jesus' foundation, because the church He's building, Matthew 16, can function that way, Matthew 18. I mean, He talks in both chapters about the keys to the kingdom. Compare those 2 chapters and you'll see there's a very good correlation between that revelation of Jesus being the only rock that it can be built on, with who Jesus is, and therefore putting into practice His words, and the keys to the kingdom, and then being able, with Him in our midst, to solve problems in the church, with some place to stand that won't cause us to sink and end up drowning in the attempt to solve some other problem, and we get pushed out the door for being a troublemaker, just simply for trying to do what Jesus said with the best of intentions in heart. So think about all that. That has to change in the place where you're at. It has to change in order to honor Jesus in the place where you're at. If it's not that way, then fast and pray and do what you need to do until it is that way. Don't be disobedient to the vision from heaven. God has shown us what His heart is, and a lot of other Uzzes are going to die. And it wasn't really Uzz's fault. There are innocent bystanders that die when we do things that are not God's way. They're pregnant teens and a myriad of things that never had to happen because we're doing things man's way instead of God's way. So please take this with the utmost of seriousness and soberness.